The Bible Treasury. A monthly magazine of papers on scriptural subjects. Volume 19, Article 1, Part 64 of 93, 1892 and 1893. The Early Chapters of Genesis. By William Kelly. Genesis 10 verse 4. We have now to offer such an explanation as we can on another branch of the Japhetic race. It may be premised that they come next after Madai. Of this last we have no details, only indeed of Gomer's sons, as now of Javan's, the Celtic and the Italo-Hellenic, families respectively. It has been already shown briefly on verse 2 that Javan represents Greece. Ionia however, or Iones, answers most nearly to the Hebrew name, a narrow district in Asia Minor, of which Greek colonies are said to have possessed themselves more than 1,000 years BC, sometime after the Dorian conquest of Peloponnesus, and even after their advance toward Attica, Ma 1/4 Dorians, 2511, Tufnell and Lewis tr 1830. Not only was Ionia remarkable for its commercial prosperity, but for excellence in art and poetry, in history and philosophy, before the mother country attained any eminence in these pursuits. Smith's Dictionary of Gr&R Geography, 261, Kernel 1. Ezekiel 27 verse 13 speaks of Javan among the traffickers with Tyre, only we must distinguish from it Javan of Uzal in verse 19, which seems to mean the capital town of Yemen or Arabia Felix. But those who migrated here and elsewhere were the race who long before were in Attica and in part of the Peloponnesus. Of course, none can wonder at varied forms of mythical genealogy, but the fact is certain of the early predominance of the Ionian name, as Moses here gives it, for a general description of Greece, Thirlwall's History I 134. In fact, Greece is so designated from Genesis 10 to Zechariah 9. Homer in Il. 13685, Aeschylus, in Pers 176, 568, 948 and Supple 72, employ a word that approximates to the Hebrew term. And the sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim, verse 4, see note. Note. Dath renders the verse, Graecorum coloniae sunt Elis, Tartsus, Italia et Dodonii, seen since this paper was written. End of note. As Javan unquestionably answers to the Greeks in general and is represented in the Ionian race particularly, it is acknowledged that Elisha also belongs to that people. Ezekiel 27 verse 7 helps us to the conclusion that the isles or maritime parts pertain to his lot. Josephus applied the name to the Aeolians, as others to Hellas, which was adopted by J. D. Michaelis, Speisel I 79. But Bochet preferred the Peloponnesus as an extension of Elis. The commerce with Tyre points to the islands as well as to the Morea. See note. Note. We may compare with this what the late BP of St. David's gives as a note to his History of Greece, I 40. Welker, Uber Incredis Coloni in Theban, p. 30, observes that III plus or minus II superscript 3 IA 1/2 or III superscript 3 II 1/2 II, 4 III plus or minus I superscript 3 II superscript 1, signifying the illustrious, is most probably only another form of a 1/4 III and III, and, having illustrated his proposition by a number of examples, concludes with the remark, hence it appears that the forms, a 1/4 III, a 1/4 III, a 1/4 III 1/2, a 1/4 II plus or minus I 3/4, a 1/4 II plus or minus I degree II or a 1/4 II plus or minus I superscript 3 II, in III superscript 3 II 1/2, as well as in I plus or minus I superscript 3 II, in Crete I plus or minus I superscript 3 II, Paus 848, and have all one origin. The Hebrew name corresponding is more certainly Elisha, the eldest of Javan's sons, as we may add. Indeed IA 1/4 degree III superscript 1 IA 1/4 degree III. I degree. I would seem to be but another class or form of the same fruitful stock, which, like the foregoing, Greek imagination personified, and developed into a variety of poetic myths. In scripture we have nothing but the simple and solid truth, as far as it fell in with the divine design to give it, in carrying out his plans for the earth, of which Israel will ever be found to be the center, save in the abnormal state when through their apostasy they became lo-ami as they are still. End of note. Tarshish follows, and here it appears that we need not doubt an original settlement on the south shore of Spain, where also the Phoenicians later had factories, and whence by their ships they brought to Tyre silver, iron, tin, and lead, as Ezekiel 27 verse 12 informs us. The ships of Tarshish were the most famous for merchandise in ancient times. Psalm 72 verse 10 is of itself sufficient to indicate a considerable stretch of country, not merely the well-known city of Tarsus at the mouth of the Betis, or Guadalquivir. There is no valid ground to doubt that this was the region to which Jabin's second son gave the name. There may have been another place so called in the southeast or Indian Ocean, to which Solomon's ships sailed from Ezion-Geber, compare 1 Kings 9 verse 26, 2 Chronicles 9 verse 21. For we have no ground to suppose the route around Africa by the Cape of Good Hope was then known, nor, if it were, could the south of Spain supply ivory, and asses, and peacocks, which point rather to India or Ceylon. Tarsus in Cilicia, which Josephus conjectured, in no way, meets what is said in the references of Scripture. There is no difficulty as to Kittim, which is a term beyond controversy applied to two of the peninsulas of Europe, first Greece or Macedon, then Rome or Italy. So the writer of Maccabees speaks of Greece, chapters 1 verse 1, 8 verse 5, as Daniel 11 verse 30 is decisive as to Rome. So in the prophecy of Balaam, number 24:24, we learn of a fleet from the west afflicting Ashur, when all man's power comes to destruction. In Jeremiah 3 verse 10 and Ezekiel 28 verse 6 we hear of the isles or sea coasts of Kittim, which can hardly mean Cyprus, as understood Josephus and many since his day, though Gesenius approved. He allows however that a wider signification is called for as in not a few scriptures here cited. Dodanum remains, which some, from the similarity of sound it seems, would connect with the famous Dodona in Epirus, but the celebrity of an ancient oracle would scarcely give warrant for a place in this chapter. There is another reading which appears in 1 Chronicles 1 verse 7, and Rhodians have been thought to correspond with it. The Septuagint has the same people for Dodon in Ezekiel 27 verse 15, which is assuredly an error. The learned Bochit suggests the Rhone, at whose mouth was an ancient Greek colony and emporium. More than one Targum understood the common reading of the Dardans, and Gesenius inclines to this view in his Monumenta Fene. 432 and Thes LL Hebrew and ch 1266. It was a branch of the widely spread Pelasgic stock. Curiously enough Strabo, 7, preserves a fragment of Hesiod, of Dodona as a seat of the Pelasgians. See also Hes. Girdle, ed. Alt. 295.